Joining us now is Daniel D. Martino, a fellow at the Manhattan Institute and the founder of the Dissident Project. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me today. Now, you were born in Venezuela. What are you hearing about conditions on the ground from family and friends there?
Well, that it was truly the most disastrous event that Venezuelans in their memory have ever experienced. I have friends who've lost, their property, their house, everything that they own, really. Thankfully, none of my loved ones died, but a lot of people died, and we don't really know yet how many. The worst part of it is not really the natural disaster, but what followed, which is that there's no path to recovery with the current people in power. They were hindering the recovery process. If anything, the little that has been able to be done has been thanks to the aid of people abroad, around the world, and especially foreign governments.
So I wanted to ask you that. Is enough being done to help the country, or is more needed?
I think that what's really needed more than aid is for there to be a transition process towards a free country in Venezuela. And that is something that only the United States really can pressure for. And that if it happens, that's the only path to recovery, because otherwise, the tens of thousands of people who've lost their homes in this natural disaster, who's going to rebuild it? Who will find it profitable to build homes for poor people who have nothing to pay for, unless the country becomes rich once again, as it should be, given that it has the largest oil reserves in the world?
And unfortunately, that is a cycle that we sometimes see in these situations. Is the Venezuelan government helping or hindering relief efforts?
I would say that certainly if this had happened without the raid on Maduro on January 3rd, it would be much worse. But it's also true that the Venezuelan regime has still hindered the effort. And with hindered, I mean not only that they didn't respond on time and rescued people, people had to go through the rubble for their loved ones on their own for days. But that even Venezuelans who were very generous and wanted to go help, that were sending aid, the government confiscated the aid and stole it. That you saw National Guard members go through the rubble of the destroyed buildings, not to help the victims, but to steal their belongings. How evil do you have to be to do those things in that situation? And so that is why Venezuelans are so outraged at the Delcy Rodríguez regime.
At a time where we are seeing socialism spreading across the United States, shockingly, you have spoken out about how the socialist regime damaged Venezuela. Can you briefly explain more about this to our viewers?
Yeah, I think people need to understand that with socialism, we mean the literal meaning, which is government ownership or control over the means of production. And that's what the Venezuelan regime did since they came into power over a quarter of a century ago. And what they did was simple. They took people's businesses, they took people's property, the property that they didn't take, they told you what to do with it, right? And with that, I'm talking about simple things like increasing the minimum wage. And I don't mean by a little bit, but by maybe 10 times, 20 times. I'm talking about price controls on every good and service you can imagine. Obviously, rent control. Obviously, it's illegal to evict somebody out of your property. And then just corruption and high taxation and regulation that strangled the economy, right? Because once every basic industry was controlled by the government and there was no profit motive, nobody was willing to fix things. Things fell apart. The electric grid, this is why many people in Venezuela don't have power or water, is that the government took those providers and then there was no money to fix the cables or the pipes, and so they burst. And that is what needs to change, right? And that's something that not only can happen in Venezuela, but it can happen anywhere. We see it even here in the United States. What are some socialist government enterprises that we have? The Postal Service that loses billions a year, and it's much inferior to private providers. We have even the VA relative to private hospitals. We have Amtrak, the government trains losing billions a year. That is what would happen to anything that the government takes over. It's not because Venezuela is special. It's happened in Eastern Europe, in China, in Africa, and it can happen here too.
Many hope democracy is on the horizon for Venezuela. What comes next for the country, and can the U.S. play a role?
I think that I think we need to pray that certainly democracy is on the horizon in Venezuela, because the people that have governed Venezuela have really tore it apart. This is a country that was so beautiful, that welcomed people from all over the world, including my own grandparents who were there from Europe in the 50s. And now it's a country that is the largest refugee crisis in the world. It's the opposite. Venezuela went from exporting oil to exporting people. And I hope that's the case. I think that the U.S. is the only country that can play a role here, leading it. Certainly President Trump has done a good thing by removing Maduro, but more needs to be done. And with more, I mean, they need to pressure the interim authorities to schedule elections so that they leave. I mean, these are not good people. These are people who, by the way, they're not even Christians at all. These are people who revere witchcraft, who have really destroyed the country that used to be a really great Catholic nation and ruled it without regards to value for human life, which is why they didn't help the earthquake victims, right?
Daniel DiMartino, a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.